it just never happened. And there's no explanation for why, like why it wasn't happening. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. For those of you who don't know, my name is Angel, and today I'm going to have a little bit more of a personal video. I will preface this with saying, if you don't like hearing about things that have to do with feminine body parts and things that happen to us as females, just forewarning you guys, there might be a little bit TMI, as people like to say, but this is what happened to me, and I feel like it's necessary to just be open about what I have to discuss. So the topic that I'm going to be discussing today is infertility, dealing with infertility, fertility treatments, living with a hormone disorder called Pcos or polycystic ovarian syndrome, and just my struggles with that. So that is what I'm going to be discussing, like I said. So if you don't want to hear about that, then you probably don't want to watch this video. I feel like the more information that is out there, the more people are open about what struggles they've gone through with infertility or with, you know, Pcos, things like that. I feel like it's going to just make it easier for the next woman that struggles with this. That is the point of this video. I just want to put my story out there, and maybe the research that I've done could benefit and help the next person. With that being said, I am also going to be knitting a blanket during this because I don't want to get emotional, and I feel like if I'm focusing on something else, then maybe it'll help me to not be emotional. But I did get a question on Instagram. Is there a way to find out if you have Pcos sooner than when you're trying to conceive? Absolutely. I want to also just say to start out with, getting diagnosed with Pcos does not automatically mean you're going to be infertile. There are so many women who have Pcos and who have had healthy children, multiple children, even some with no medical assistance at all. So my story is not like the norm. What happened to me does not just happen to everybody. If you do have Pcos, like, and it's new for you and you're scared, like, don't take my story and think that that's what's gonna happen to you, because it probably won't. When I was in 8th grade, I got my first period, and my cramps were unbearable. Like, I could not deal with them. They were so awful. I couldn't go to school. I was having not only like intense cramps and back pain, but intense vaginal, like stabbing pain, like feeling like I'm being stabbed from the inside. Very, very painful. My mom took me into the doctor. They said that I had some type of hormone imbalance, but didn't necessarily diagnose me with Pcos at that point. I will say, until recently, and even some doctors still only diagnose Pcos with if you actually have cysts on your ovaries, and that is such old medicine. That is not the only way to diagnose you with Pcos. So please know that. Some women get cysts. That does not mean that they have Pcos. Some women have Pcos and never have a cyst. So that's very old medicine if that is how someone is trying to diagnose Pcos. The doctor said that I had a hormone imbalance, and she automatically put me on birth control, which did help my period cramps and those pains, and my periods were very normal, and everything was a little bit more regulated because of the birth control. So I was on birth control all the way through graduation. When I hit my junior to senior years in high school, I started to really deal with depression, anxiety attacks, things like that, that I did not realize at the time were because of Pcos, but now looking back, that is definitely because of Pcos. Cut to 2011, my husband and I get married. We went to high school together, so he knew all the struggles that I had. I haven't even started doing this. He knew all the struggles that I had been through with my period and just cramps, and I always just would talk about how I just felt like something wasn't right with me. We found a fertility clinic and we went in and just kind of like explained my situation and the fact that I've never really been able to gain weight. I've always been very, very underweight. Well, I used to be very, very underweight. And it was always just really hard for me to gain weight. I also dealt with a lot of fainting spells, especially when I started to get on birth control. My mom at the time, she thought that I just had low blood sugar, but yeah, that was also due to Pcos. So I just told my doctor all of these things, and she said that it could be one of two things. It could either be that I had a thyroid disorder or that I had something called polycystic ovarian syndrome. So she did a transvaginal ultrasound. We did a lot of blood tests. We talked about some of my symptoms, how I deal with depression, how I've always had acne. At this point, I'm 19 when Shane and I first got married, so I guess I still was like a teenager. But even to this day, like I still deal with acne here and there. Like my skin is definitely not the best. And once my blood test came back, I did not have a thyroid disorder, but she did see a rise in my androgen hormone levels. I'm pretty sure that's the hormone that was heightened. That should be less. With my blood tests and my irregular periods. Oh, I forgot to mention, after I graduated high school, I didn't have health insurance anymore because I was on my own and I wasn't able to get on birth control. So when I wasn't on birth control, I was not having any periods, and the weight that I was slightly able to gain on birth control totally disappeared, and I just went right back to being super underweight. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. I did write notes. I should be looking at them. I have really bad memory. So with that diagnosis of Pcos, obviously we're young, we're 19 and 20 years old, so it's not like we were trying to have a kid at that point. I just wanted to have an understanding of why my body was the way that it was. My doctor, again, put me on birth control to regulate my hormones, to give me a more steady period, and it helped with my mood swings, and my acne cleared up again, and I was able to gain just a little bit of weight. I wanted to grab my computer because there was one of my blog entries that I explained pretty well and in detail what Pcos is. The Pcos that I have is called thin or skinny Pcos. It is a little bit different because the majority of women that get diagnosed with Pcos actually struggle with controlling their weight. A lot of them are overweight, have a hard time losing that weight, and when they do get treatment, most of them get put on a drug called metformin. So women with Pcos are at high risk for diabetes and heart disease. The most common symptoms of Pcos are acne, weight gain or trouble losing weight, excessive body and facial hair, thinning hair on the scalp, irregular periods, infertility, and depression. Those are just the most common symptoms, but that doesn't mean that if you have Pcos, you have all of them, because I definitely don't have all of them. The other thing with Pcos is the more common Pcos, a lot of women struggle with high blood pressure and, like I said, weight gain. But with skinny Pcos, I was dealing with the inability to gain weight. I was unhealthily underweight, and I dealt with low blood pressure, which is why I was fainting. The birth control actually exacerbated my low blood pressure, so I would faint if I wasn't hydrated or if I hadn't eaten anything and it was early in the morning, and that was not fun. And now my best friend is FaceTiming me. What up?
Hey.
Okay, where was I? I was having a lot of fainting spells because of the birth control. All the research that I've done about Pcos, they think that it is genetic. They think that it comes from your mother's side, but I don't really have a lot of extended family, so I mean, my mom wasn't infertile, like she had 4 kids, no problem. So I don't know. They don't really know why we get it. I went on birth control for a while in the beginning of our marriage, but I just, with there's a lot of negatives to being on birth control for so many years. I just wanted to do something that was a little bit better for my body. So I got off the pill, and then I tried to just drink a lot of protein shakes and work out. And I was even like drinking Ensures to try and get my body's weight to regulate. Because the thing is that if you're underweight, you're not going to have your period. So that is another reason why my periods were so irregular and I would go months without them. Without those hormone supplements, not only was I not having my period, but my actual hormones were so off balance and crazy. I would have these terrible mood swings, and I would go into just these awful depressions, and I pretty much had no libido, and I'm like 20, so it wasn't good. It wasn't a good thing. So I went back to my doctor and I said, okay, look, I don't want to be on birth control, but I want something to help my body to get the hormones that it needs. So she put me on a regimen of progesterone and estrogen. We tried that out for a little bit, but all while that was happening, I went into like a severe depression, and I just gave up on life basically. I had to go and see a therapist. I had to get put on medicine, and yeah, so that I never really got to see if the progesterone and estrogen regimen actually worked for me. I never got back on that. So cut to 2014. I wasn't on anything at this point. I was just trying to live my life, and I started to notice that I was having a period about every month. I gained 5 pounds, and we just felt like we were in a place in our life where we were ready to try and have a baby. In October 2015, we went back to my doctor, and I will say that my doctor was a fertility specialist. She specialized in fertility in women with Pcos and endocrinology. She herself had went through in vitro and dealt with infertility. So, I mean, she was like a dream doctor. I could not have gotten a better doctor, honestly. So we went back to her right away. They said, before we do any like intense stuff with you, we want to check Shane. So they checked his swimmers, and he came back super great and healthy and everything. So yay, that was not an issue. She wanted to see if I could ovulate on my own. So we bought the like home predictor kits. I was not ovulating on my own, big shocker. She introduced us to this drug called letrozole, which is most commonly used for women with breast cancer because it stops their production of estrogen. They found that it also helps with women that deal with infertility because it increases the production of a hormone called FSH and can cause ovulation. Once your menstrual cycle starts, like the first day your menstrual cycle starts, that is your day 1. And you're supposed to take the letrozole on day 3 of your menstrual cycle, and it is a 5-day course, so you end it on day 7. And she started me out on a 2.5 milligram dose, and then on day 10 you start peeing on ovulation sticks until you get a positive. But since it was the first time that I had taken that medication and we weren't sure if it was working because I wasn't ovulating on my own, I would have to go in and get a transvaginal ultrasound on day 12 and 14 to check my follicle growth and see if I was actually ovulating on the medication, which I did not ovulate with that medication, and my biggest follicle was only 6 millimeters. So I believe in order to have a mature follicle that does what it should and everything, I think it needs to be over 20. So yeah, the first round was a bust. She realized that the medicine was not a high enough dose, so she ended up tripling my dosage to 7.5 milligrams, and she wanted me to just start it right away. Let me tell you that the hot flashes were ridiculous. That was like one of my biggest symptoms or side effects with the letrozole, but it actually was working a little bit better. I went back in and got another ultrasound, and that one, my biggest follicle was 13 millimeters, which still wasn't as mature as you need it, but it was showing that it was better. I finally did ovulate. At this point, with what we were doing, it was just medication to make me ovulate, make sure that I'm ovulating, taking ovulation predictor kits, so then you just have timed intercourse is basically how it works. So that is what we were doing. A couple days after I had ovulated, I started to feel really, really crappy. I was getting a lot of anxiety and feeling really nauseous, and I was getting these like heat bumps on my chest and my back. I thought that I had started my period because I was getting, and here's where it's gonna get graphic, so I warned you guys, but I was getting this really like clumpy jelly-like substance coming out of me that was like brownish reddish, like with a reddish tint. It seemed like it was like a clot or something. Like it was very weird, and I was having these really awful cramps, and my boobs were sensitive and my lower back started to ache. I wrote my doctor and everything, and we weren't sure if this was actually my period because I definitely never experienced something like that before. So after a while, she had me take a pregnancy test, but it was negative. Since we thought it was my period because I wasn't pregnant, we started my third round of the letrozole, and at this point, I'm very constipated, still having major hot flashes. I was still having a little bit of those clumps for like 4 or 5 days, and then it stopped and the cramps stopped, and then I started to get like bright red spotting. So I just was feeling really terrible all over, and I contacted my doctor. She had me come in, and it turned out that I had a huge hemorrhagic cyst on my ovary. It was 44 times 48 millimeters, which is like 4 centimeters large or something like that. It was huge. So I was like on restrictions. I could not even like jump up and down. It was really large, and with cysts like that, not only are you worried about it rupturing, which you would need to go to the ER and probably get surgery. If your ovaries kind of twist like that, they could die off. So yeah, it was very scary. So everything had to stop, sex had to stop, everything. Plus I was in pain, so that wasn't happening anyways. And I just kind of had to wait it out. I kept in contact with my doctor. We did some blood tests just to see like where my hormones were at, and she actually concluded that I had had a chemical pregnancy, which is a very early miscarriage, and that when my mature follicle burst, it didn't stay open and heal like it's supposed to. It ended up closing and became a ball of blood and fluid and became a cyst. So that sucked. Then by December, I started my 4th round, and I had 2 mature follicles, which were 20.5 millimeters and 19 millimeters, which were the biggest that I had ever had. And so we decided to do a trigger shot, which doesn't like increase your chances of pregnancy or anything like that. It just is a little bit easier for timed intercourse, because when you get your trigger shot, it like makes you ovulate within those 48 hours. But that did not work. So, okay. I feel like I've been interrupted so many times during the making of this video. So sorry if it seems like I'm a little bit scattered, but I think that I just talked about doing a trigger shot and it did not work. So we started our 5th round of letrozole, and up to this point I was going in for an ultrasound during my day 12 to day 14 of my cycle to check my follicle growth. And when I hit round 5, I felt like I knew I was responding well to the medicine, and I could just count on my ovulation predictor kits to tell me if I was ovulating or not. So round 5, I did not go in for any more ultrasounds. I had ovulated, and then I started to do some more research just in case round 5 did not work. I found that there was this progesterone suppository that helped with implantation. And there was also this test called the HSG test that was supposed to check if your fallopian tubes were open, see if there was any blockage, and also to look to make sure that your uterus was a normal shape. So I contacted my doctor and just said, you know, if round 5 doesn't work, I'd really like to look into these tests. And so she said to know if you needed the suppository, you had to do 3 different blood draws during days 5 and 9 after ovulation. So that I couldn't do those tests until the next cycle because I had to ovulate again. So I started doing round 6 of the letrozole. I scheduled the HSG test. They insert a catheter like through your cervix, and they inject this contrast dye into your uterus, and it's supposed to come out your fallopian tubes. And they like have you set up to like be x-rayed or whatever like during the injection of the contrast dye so that you can see everything. And I'm pretty sure I still have a picture of mine, so I'll put that up on the screen if I do have it. That showed that my tubes were clear and my uterus was a normal shape. However, my uterus was upside down, and because of that, my tubes were just pointing straight up, and my uterus was a little bit to the left of my body. So all of that being said, she said that the test was clear, that my uterus position and everything was not an issue for conception, and that my tubes were totally clear. Like you could see in the picture that the dye was just going right out of my tubes. So all of that was fine. Once I ovulated on my 6th round, I went in for my 3 different blood draws, and those came back and said that my progesterone levels were completely normal, so I did not need the suppository. I started my round 7 towards the end of March 2016. And by this time, we're all getting really frustrated. Even my doctor doesn't understand why it's not happening. And she tells me about this procedure called an IUI, which is where they take my husband's sperm and they like clean it out so that it's just the swimmers that they need. And when I ovulate, they inject it directly into me so that there's no swim time. Basically, there's no like travel time for his little swimmers. It just goes right to where it needs to be. But the thing is, the medicine that I was taking, the letrozole, was $5 every month, which isn't that bad. Every doctor's appointment was $30, and every ultrasound that I got which if you remember, I was getting 1 or 2 ultrasounds every cycle, was $175. With the IUI, it would be $425. All of this is out of pocket. Insurance does not care if you are infertile. They do not pay for anything. So we just didn't feel like we had the money to do that, but it was something that we thought about. Round 8 was unsuccessful. So then by round 9, I started to ask more about like my egg count, because maybe that's an issue, and I hadn't really remembered if we went over that. And it's one of the things that they checked immediately when I started this whole process, and she said that my egg count was consistently over 30, which is above average, and my anti-Mullerian hormone was 6.98, which is over the 90th percentile for women my age at the time. So everything seemed to be fine on that count. And then a coworker suggested that I used this, basically it's lubrication called Pre-Seed, and it's supposed to mimic your body's natural fertile fluids. So I got that from Amazon and we started using that. And round 9 was also unsuccessful. So I took some time off of medication because we had a trip planned to Florida for our 5-year anniversary, and I just didn't want to deal with medicine at that point. Then in October of 2016, I started my round 10, which was also unsuccessful. And by February of 2017, we were on round 12. And when that was unsuccessful, I took more time off because then we went to Indonesia and Zika was running rampant at that point. So my doctor said that we should stop treatment. And after we got back from Indonesia, she said that usually you want to wait 6 months before trying to conceive, because if one of us did have it, it wouldn't be life-threatening to us. But if we were to get pregnant with Zika in our system, the baby could have a lot of health problems. So we had to wait 6 months, and by the time 6 months was over, we had moved, so I wasn't able to see my regular doctor anymore when we were ready to start trying again. But she had a doctor that she recommended that was close by, so we went to see that doctor, who got all my notes and knew what we went through. And she suggested that I try taking Clomid, which was the original infertility drug. Most people are more familiar with Clomid, but the reason my original doctor did not want me on that was because it had a lot of bad side effects, like really bad side effects, and you can only take it for 6 rounds. A round is only considered a successful round if you ovulate. So if you take it for 6 rounds and you don't ovulate on any of them, then those rounds don't really count. So you can only take it for 6 rounds. Then if you continually take it, it will damage your uterine linings. So that's another reason why my doctor didn't really want me to take it, because letrozole doesn't have that effect. You can take letrozole as many times as you want, which is why I was able to do 12 rounds of letrozole. But yeah, this new doctor wanted me to try Clomid. So I did 5 rounds of Clomid, but I only ovulated 3 times. So really it was only 3 rounds of Clomid. And when all of those were unsuccessful, she went ahead and switched me back to letrozole. And then she said for me to get this supplement called myo-inositol, which is supposed to benefit the female reproductive system, especially the ovaries. So I went ahead and got that off Amazon. And when we went back on letrozole, we were in a much better place. So we were able to afford to do an IUI. I went in during day 12 to 14 to get a transvaginal ultrasound, and I ended up having 4 mature follicles, which was the most I ever had. And then they do a trigger shot, and then you go in the next day and you come in for the procedure. And that one did not take, and we were really devastated, but we knew we wanted to do it at least 2 times, because what a lot of people don't realize is that your ovaries take turns. Like one cycle, it'll be your left side of your ovaries that will be the ones that will have the mature follicles, and then the next month it'll be your right side, and it just keeps rotating back and forth. So we went in the very next cycle, did it all over again, did another IUI, and that one was not successful either. So that was in 2019 that all happened, and then we were officially done. I think that it's important for people to get a better understanding of what infertility treatments are, what they can be. Like, of course, mine is it's just my story. Everyone's story is very different, but that's what I went through. It's a lot living with that. I feel like we need to talk more about this and what really happens and what we go through, and that it's not always successful. So I really just wanted to tell my story. I am really trying not to get emotional, which is why I'm knitting. But it was a painful time that I went through, and the desire to be a mother never goes away from you. And I just have to put that love to other things, and that love that was reserved for my future child. You know, like, you don't go through that many rounds of fertility treatments and those years because you kind of want to have a kid. Like, it was my dream. I dreamed of being a mother, and it was hard to feel like a failure. Like, I think that it's something that people don't understand, that don't go through that, is that when you have infertility, you feel like a failure. Like, you feel like your body is betraying you. That as women, we were made with the ability to create life, to have an embryo become a 10-fingered, 10-toed, 2-eyed, like, beautiful baby. Like, that is what our body was built to do. And when you can't do that, it can be so frustrating. And I think that that was the biggest part of my journey that was so frustrating, because I did so much research and I did everything that I could to have a positive outcome. My doctor was frustrated. I did so many different tests and all of them came back clear. I was ovulating, Shane's healthy. Like, I think that's the part that just really frustrates me the most, is it just never happened, and there's no explanation for why it wasn't happening. And that's why it can be really hurtful and damaging when people who, yes, I realize, are trying to be encouraging and see the silver lining or whatever, say, you know, it'll happen when the time is right, because that is a bunch of baloney. And when you deal with infertility and people say it'll happen when the time is right, that doesn't help, because we're actively trying to have a baby. And if we're not actively trying, it's not going to happen, because I need medical assistance. So do you see where the logic doesn't really fit in? That makes me feel like there's something in my life that's not right, and that's why it's not the right time. Like, that doesn't make sense and that does not help. and that can just be really hurtful. And I will say from experience that that words sometimes aren't really what's needed. It's just somebody being there. Somebody just being there and just listening. And especially me, Shane wasn't able to always go to all of my billions of appointments and blood draws and ultrasounds. So I had my best friend who went with me, and that was so encouraging. And I will always be so appreciative of that she did that for me. If you have somebody in your life that's going through stuff, going through infertility, just be there for them. You don't have to say the perfect thing. They just need to know that they're not alone and that they have support. I don't want this video to be like a woe is me. Like I'm not saying all this stuff to like have you guys feel bad for me or anything like that. Like, gosh, no. It's been a couple years since our last treatments, and you know, we're happy. We have a really good life. I have all my dogs and all my plants, and like, you know, we're moving. Like, we have a lot going for us. But I just feel like it's something that I wanted to talk about and wanted to share and be open. If you are somebody that is struggling or has struggled, like, you're not alone. Please know, you guys, that like we're not trying right now. You know, I feel like when we were trying to conceive, I was doing a lot of research, and if there was something that I was willing to try, I tried it in the nicest way possible. Like, I don't want suggestions or recommendations, because I mean, we're not trying right now, so it wouldn't benefit me anyways. Please know that if you guys have any questions or anything like that, like, I'm down to converse about this and to talk about it. And if I can help somebody else in any way, like, that would really make my day. Maybe something that I went through can help somebody else. That's really my hope for this. Well, guys, I hope that this video was informative, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.